everybody, for coming to the College Football Betting with Aaron Torres YouTube channel. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead, click that subscribe button. It helps our channel grow. It helps our audience grow. I appreciate it more than you know, as we're talking college football on this channel year round. Appreciate your support. Click that subscribe button. It's the one listen, I was thinking about this, is that when we thought 12-team college football playoff and we thought games on home campus stadiums, environments, this, that, with due respect, this is no disrespect intended, we weren't thinking about SMU against Penn State. We weren't thinking about Indiana going to Notre Dame. But Ohio State, Tennessee, was that a game we all could have seen coming in the preseason? I think I said Ohio State, Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee is going to Ohio State in this game. But two mega brands, two just massive fan bases, so much at stake. I think two teams that feel like if we can get through this one, like, I know Oregon's the number one team in the country, but you mean to tell me Tennessee is going to be afraid of Oregon? So it's an awesome game, interesting environment. We'll talk about it in a minute. And Ohio State is a 7.5-point favorite in this one. The over-under down to 45.5, which shows how good these two teams are. First of all, let me say this. I don't know if this is controversial. I don't know if this is going to get me in trouble. I find the whole discourse outside of this game itself in Ohio State to be fascinating. Okay, what have been the two big stories since the season ended? Two big stories maybe since the bracket came out. We know how things ended at Ohio State for the regular season. We can argue it, we can fight it, we can yell and scream about Ryan Day, but we know what happened. They lose to Michigan. Okay, we're over. But what happens after that? Kirk Herbstreit on the selection show says Ohio State, maybe it would have been better if they start on the road. And it's funny, on the Aaron Torres pod, we had Zach Smith, host of the Menace to Sports show, former assistant coach at Ohio State. And I asked him about those exact quotes. He said, I don't think it's crazy to say that it would have been better for Ohio State to start off on the road. We know how much talent they have, but you could argue the two best performances Ohio State has had all year were at Oregon and at Penn State. Now, I know late in the year there were more injuries. Josh Simmons played in that Oregon game. He doesn't play against Michigan, but I do think that there's something to that. Ryan Day has weirdly been a pretty good coach in games where basically nobody gives him a chance. 2 years ago against Georgia in the playoff, the Penn State game this year, you can't say nobody gave him a chance, but remember, they had all those O-line injuries. They're shuffling bodies. People think they might actually lose. They actually played very well in that game. So I think it's interesting. Herbstreit brought that up. And then the other thing that came out this week, where Ryan Day basically tried to just poo-poo losing to Michigan. He's like, look, it's a 12-team playoff era. Our focus was always to make the playoff. I think that in Ohio State fans, I don't want to speak for you. It felt like that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And so I am curious what happens in this game if Ohio State struggles out of the gate, struggles to move the ball, is stubborn that they want to run the ball instead of pass it, because I do think there could be boos, and I do think there could be some inappropriate chants. And then I also just think it's interesting, the conversation that we referenced earlier in the show, which is the fan takeover aspect of it. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that there are going to be a lot of Tennessee fans in that stadium. Tennessee fans, to their credit, I think Tennessee, it's interesting. I'm going a little bit off script here, but as somebody who covers this stuff day in and day out, it feels like 2022, that was the Hendon Hooker year for Tennessee. It was just a surprise. Everything was so shocking. The team was kind of on this magic run. I think pretty early, Tennessee fans kind of figured out we have a chance to be really good. And you look at all their road games. I remember when they played at Arkansas, I had people texting me from the stadium. I cannot believe how much orange is in this stadium. The Georgia game, a lot of orange in that stadium. There's going to be a lot of orange in this one as well. So it's going to be an interesting environment. And what I think is also interesting, let's start with Tennessee, because we've spent, since this 12-team playoff has kind of come about, what have we talked about nonstop? We've talked about the idea of SEC teams, schools from the South, traveling up north in December to play true road games. Well, Tennessee, certainly Ohio State's going to have more fans, but Tennessee's going to have fans there. But then too, with the weather, Tennessee is one of the northernmost cities in the SEC. I looked up the temperature. It's like 50 degrees there right now. It's going to be like 35 at kickoff in Columbus. It's not like it's Miami or LSU or Florida or whomever that's used to 80 and humid even in January. That's not what Tennessee is. Two, and I think this is interesting as well, Tennessee is built more like a Big Ten power running defense than basically anybody else in the SEC. Like, think about the SEC. Alabama, run the ball with Jalen Milroe. Georgia, passed the ball a lot with Carson Beck this year. Texas, obviously, kind of a balance of both. Tennessee makes no bones, especially on the road. Josh Heupel has been very conservative, isn't the right word, but he has certainly put the ball in Dylan Sampson's hand. This is a top 10 run defense, a run offense. This is Tennessee now in the SEC, in the country, number one run offense in the SEC. And then, oh, by the way, when you talk about individual players, Dylan Sampson probably just did not get enough credit for the season that he had. Now, locally in the SEC, he did. But this was a guy that on the season was the SEC's leading rusher with over 1,400 yards per carry, 1,400 yards on the season, about 6 yards per carry, 22 touchdowns. Nobody else had more than 15 in the SEC, averaged 123 yards on the ground. And so I bring it up because certainly Ohio State's got a great defense, but Tennessee, they kind of want to play a Big Ten-ish type game. They play more like Penn State and Michigan than probably anybody else in the SEC. By the way, the defense, you don't need me to tell you, but the defense has been excellent all year. Top 10 in the country in total defense. Top 10 in the country, by the way, in scoring. Top 10 in the country in scoring defense. Let me just confirm that. Yep, number 4 in the country. They're giving up 14 points per game. And then they are especially good against the run. That's important. What got Ohio State in trouble against Michigan? They tried to be a power team. They tried to run the ball between the tackles. It did not work. It's not going to get any easier against the Tennessee team with an elite defensive line. And then the one thing that Tennessee maybe even does better than anybody that Ohio State has faced this year, including Penn State, including Michigan, they get after the quarterback. 93 TFLs. That's 9th most in college football, more than any team that Ohio State has faced. And then, oh, by the way, they also finished the season with a total of, 29 sacks, which was top third or so in college football. From the Ohio State perspective, listen, team has been analyzed and overanalyzed. We know the talent. And, let's start with the positive. Let's be a glasses half full podcast. Jim Knowles has earned his paycheck this year. Jim Knowles has that defense playing at an elite level. Number 2 in the country in number 1 in the country in total defense in terms of yards per game allowed. Scoring defense, the number 1 team in the country, averaging 11 points per game allowed. The rush defense has been phenomenal. It is a team that has not let anybody run the ball on them. They're giving up less than 2.8 yards per carry, 9 rushing touchdowns, is 7th in the country. And then, oh, by the way, the 96 yards on the ground per game that they're giving up is top 10 in the country as well. So they're not letting anybody move the ball on offense. And then that secondary has been really good as well. I know they don't get the credit of some of the defensive front, especially after the Oregon game, whatever, they kind of struggled a little bit. That secondary has been phenomenal. Ask Curtis Rourke about the secondary. Ask, Drew Aller about the opportunities that he had to throw the ball downfield. That Ohio State secondary is elite, and that defense is elite. And listen, I think what this whole game comes down to is Ryan Day going to be willing to air it out and open things up? Because when he has, this offense has operated at the highest level. We don't need to go through, excuse me, we don't need to go through the Ohio State-Michigan game. But we all know why Ohio State lost that game. It's because they have Jeremiah Smith, they have Carnell Tate, and they decide they want to be a power football team, and it just simply is not going. It did not work against Michigan. It is not going to work in this game. And it's just, it's still phenomenal to look at that, the result of that Michigan game. They averaged 5.3 yards per completion. Jeremiah Smith, who is as gifted of a receiver prospect as I have ever seen, finishes with 5 catches for 35 yards. And I still go back to that game. Think about it. The first half, what was it? The final drive of the first half where they just dropped back and they were like, you know what? The first couple series, they wanted to run the ball. And then the final drive of the first half, they're just chucking it all over the field. And you're like, oh my God, they just figured out that Michigan has no answers in the secondary. Will Johnson's hurt. They have no answers. And then what they do the entire second half, they just try to run the ball. And so, that's what this game comes down to. I can sit here and analyze this number, that number, whatever. If Ryan Day doesn't get stubborn, if he doesn't want to prove how tough his team is or how this or how that, I think they'll be okay. But if he wants to run the ball, if he wants to try to whatever. If the weather's cold, now the weather's going to be cold, but there's not supposed to be precipitation. The wind isn't supposed to be crazy. Ryan Day, let Will Howard cook. I mean, you're paying Will Howard probably $1.5 million, $2 million a year. Let Will Howard cook. And so that is what this game comes down to. But I'll be honest, when I look at this game, to me, it's pretty straightforward. I think Tennessee plus 7.5 is the bet here. I'm in shock that Tennessee is over a touchdown underdog in this game. First of all, we've heard all of the conversations, all of the narratives. The Shoe is a really tough place to play, but Tennessee plays in tough venues pretty much everywhere in college football. They've played at Oklahoma. They played at a sold-out Razorback Stadium at night, and I know Ohio State fans will laugh at it. Arkansas is loud, especially at night. They played at Georgia, so you have that variable. The other thing is a couple things. One, Josh Heupel has shown he's not going to let Nico beat them in big environments, especially on the road. They're going to rely on the run game. They're going to rely on the defense. It's going to be close. It's going to be low scoring. I just don't know that I trust Ohio State. I don't know that they should be favored